Why is your CPU's cache memory always orders of magnitude faster than your computer's main memory, the RAM? It's a question we often dismiss with a simple, surface-level answer. Well, cache is closer to the CPU. That's why. And while physical proximity is absolutely a contributing factor, and bus width and sophisticated transfer protocols certainly play their parts, they are merely the finishing touches on a far more fundamental and decisive truth. They are the icing, but we need to talk about the cake itself because the true non-negotiable reason for this monumental speed disparity lies not in location or traffic rules, but in a profound technological divide, a fundamental schism in the very nature of how the data is stored at the most microscopic electron level, transistor-driven core of the system. This story is about two siblings in the digital family SRAM and DRAM, and how their radically different birthrights, their core technological DNA determine their fate and their performance, shaping the entire architecture of modern computing in a grand, elegant, and inescapable compromise. This is where the narrative pivots, moving past the geographical excuses and diving headfirst into the silicon soul of the machine. The decisive factor, the technological divide, is the choice between static random access memory, SRAM, and dynamic random access memory, DRAM. Your cache, that precious tiny pool of ultra-fast information right next to your processor, relies entirely on SRAM, a luxury technology defined by stability and instantaneous access. Your main memory, the enormous pool where your operating system, applications, and documents reside, depends on DRAM, a utilitarian, density-focused technology defined by cost efficiency and a continuous need for maintenance. This distinction sets the stage for the enormous performance gap we experience every single moment we interact with a digital device. A gap that is not accidental, but the result of deliberate, optimized, and mathematically necessary engineering trade-offs. To truly appreciate the blistering speed of the cache, we must first descend into the circuit level, where the physical reality of SRAM reveals its secret. Inside a SRAM cell, the most basic unit of cache memory, a single bit of data is stored not with minimal components, but with a highly robust, dedicated, and complex structure. 6 transistors. Yes, 6 separate electronic switches are required just to hold a single 1 or a single 0. That is a massive commitment of space and resources per bit. The brilliance of this design is that 4 of these 6 transistors are arranged to form 2 cross-coupled inverters, creating a circuit that acts like a tiny, perfectly balanced digital seesaw. Once power is applied and a value is written, this circuit continuously reinforces the stored value. Think of it as a permanent digital echo chamber. The 1 keeps telling itself it's a 1, and the 0 keeps telling itself it's a 0, in an unbroken cycle of electronic affirmation. As long as the power remains, that value is stable, locked in place, and perfectly accessible. This continuous self-reinforcement means that when the CPU needs to read or write to this memory, it does so directly, instantaneously, and without any additional maintenance overhead whatsoever. There are no delays, no wait states, no need for stabilization. The data is simply there, ready to go, and eternally static. Hence the static in SRAM. This stability is the key to its incredible speed, but this architectural luxury comes with an inevitable, non-negotiable price tag, leading us to the immediate and necessary trade-off, cost and size limitations of SRAM. Because each bit demands 6 transistors, SRAM is inherently low density. It takes up massive physical space on a chip relative to the amount of data it holds, and its manufacturing cost per bit is astronomically high. This explains with crystalline clarity why your L1, L2, and L3 caches are so small, measured in mere megabytes. They are the most expensive real estate on the processor, a precious limited resource used only for the most frequently accessed and mission-critical data. SRAM is the Formula 1 car of memory technology, impossibly fast, responsive to the slightest touch, but too costly and too specialized to be used for the daily commute. Now we shift our focus to the main memory, the vast ocean of RAM that makes up the bulk of your computer's accessible storage. And we enter the realm of DRAM, governed by a completely different design philosophy. Density over speed. If SRAM is the luxurious 6-bedroom mansion, DRAM is the high-rise apartment complex sacrificing individual luxury for collective efficiency. In DRAM, the pursuit of maximum density and minimum cost dictates the design. Each bit is stored using a minimalist configuration of just a single transistor and a single capacitor. This is the great engineering compromise that makes main memory possible. The transistor acts as a gate, controlling access, while the capacitor, a tiny electronic bucket, holds the actual charge that represents the 1 or the absence of charge for the 0. This minimal, two-component design allows for far greater density than SRAM, meaning billions of bits can be crammed onto a single chip at a significantly lower manufacturing cost. This massive cost efficiency is precisely what makes 8 GB, 16 GB, or 32 GB of main memory economically feasible, transforming the dream of large-scale, affordable digital storage into a reality. But just as every compromise has a consequence, this minimalist design introduces severe and unavoidable performance penalties that are completely absent in the stable world of SRAM. The first and arguably most famous weakness of DRAM is the hidden cost of dynamism, refresh cycles. The core problem is the capacitor. It's not a perfect bucket. It leaks charge. Even with the power on, the stored electrical signal that defines the 1 gradually dissipates over milliseconds. This is a fundamental physical limitation, an electronic inevitability. If the system were to leave the cells alone, the data would simply vanish, fading away into electronic oblivion. To prevent this catastrophic data loss, every single DRAM cell must be periodically refreshed, which means the system must constantly read the value, amplify the decaying signal, and rewrite the value back to the cell before the charge drops below the threshold of recognition. This constant maintenance, this unavoidable, continuous loop of reading and rewriting that is utterly foreign to the self-sustaining nature of SRAM introduces unavoidable delays and overhead into the memory access process, reinforcing the dynamic nature of DRAM. It's like having a gigantic library where every book must be taken out, dusted, and put back on the shelf every few seconds, just to prevent it from disintegrating. This refresh cycle is a non-optional tax on performance, a hidden delay that makes DRAM inherently slower, regardless of bus speed or proximity. Compounding this maintenance overhead is the second major architectural flaw: reading destroys data, the infamous sense amplifier problem. In DRAM, when the memory controller reads a bit, the act of extracting the stored charge from the capacitor to determine its value is inherently destructive. The tiny charge literally drains away into the reading circuit. It's like checking the fuel level in a tiny gas tank. By emptying it completely, you get the information, but the resource is gone. Consequently, immediately after the value has been read and sensed, a process handled by specialized circuits called sense amplifiers, the system is forced to restore the value by rewriting the data back into the now empty capacitor. Think about that for a moment. Every single time you access a bit of data in main memory, you are performing a complex, two-step operation, read then restore, while the stable nature of an SRAM cell allows for a simple, non-destructive read. This mandatory restore or write-back cycle adds yet another layer of compounded access latency and significantly increases the overall time required for a memory operation compared to the simple, one-step process used in SRAM. The destructive read alone is a massive drag on performance that SRAM simply never has to contend with. Finally, the slower access is further exacerbated by the sheer scale and addressing complexity. Finding a single bit in DRAM. Because DRAM chips house billions of cells, they must be organized in massive two-dimensional matrices, a vast grid of rows and columns, similar to a massive spreadsheet. To find a single bit requires a two-stage decoding process. First, the memory controller must select the correct row, the row address strobe or array, and then it must select the correct column within that row, the column address strobe or CAS. This two-step process in itself introduces a latency that SRAM, typically accessed through simpler parallel decoders, avoids. But the final design concession, driven again purely by cost and hardware reduction, adds a further layer of complexity to minimize the number of physical wires, pins required on the DRAM chip, which drastically cuts manufacturing costs and increases density. Both the row and column addresses are typically sent over the same physical address lines. This means the system must rely on precise, timed control signals, RAS and CAS pulses, to distinguish between the row address information and the column address information as they travel over the identical set of wires. This multiplexing of address signals is a masterstroke of cost-saving engineering, but it requires the memory controller to perform extra timing and coordination overhead for every single access. It's like having the same postal truck deliver both the street name and the house number, requiring a precise sequential timing signal to know which piece of information to read at which moment. This complex, multi-step, multiplexed addressing scheme further slows down the entire process. creating the final, definitive speed differential. The final synthesis reveals the clear and inescapable conclusion to our central question. Why cache is faster than main memory? All the contributing delays we've explored, the constant, unavoidable cost of refresh cycles, the mandatory read-then-restore overhead of destructive reads, the time-consuming two-stage row-then-column decoding, and the added timing complexity of shared, multiplexed address signaling converge to a singular, undeniable truth. DRAM's entire design is an engineering masterclass in prioritizing capacity and cost over speed. It is a necessary and successful compromise that allows us to have huge amounts of affordable main memory. In stark contrast, SRAM's design-stable, non-destructive, single-step access, and simple addressing prioritizes speed above all else, accepting the high cost and low density as a justified price for supreme performance. Cache is not fast by accident or merely by proximity. It is fast by a deliberate, expensive, and fundamental technological choice. The story of SRAM and DRAM is more than just a lesson in computer architecture. It is a profound metaphor for the principles of optimized design and the necessity of the trade-off in all aspects of life. The greatest computer scientists didn't fail to make all memory fast. They succeeded in making memory optimized for two competing, crucial functions. They taught us that there is no single perfect solution, but rather that the best solutions are those that elegantly balance conflicting priorities. Speed versus scale, cost versus performance, stability versus density. Think about this technical trade-off and apply it to your own life, your personal architecture. How often do we try to apply an SRAM solution, high cost, high effort, perfectionist approach to a problem that really only requires a DRAM solution, low cost, high capacity, good enough approach? Do you over-engineer your daily processes, demanding six-transistor stability for mundane tasks, or do you reserve your precious, high-energy, cache resources for the truly critical decisions that demand peak performance? The lesson from the circuit board is this. Don't use the Rolls-Royce engine for the cross-country cargo haul. Be selective, be strategic, and acknowledge that sometimes, slower and bigger is the most efficient solution overall. Where in your life are you paying the high cost per bit for perfection when what you really need is the low cost per bit for capacity? What is your personal refresh cycle, that constant energy-draining maintenance you do just to hold on to certain ideas or habits? Acknowledging the necessity of compromise is the first step toward optimization. Thank you so much for joining me on this deep dive today. Wishing you all the very best of health and happiness. And if you found this journey as fascinating as I did, please consider hitting that subscribe button and ringing the bell so you don't miss our next adventure into the heart of technology.